Even though I've been involved in Druidry since I was 16, and that's been my kind of primary spiritual path and inspiration, I've never wanted to kind of box myself in or even label myself, you know. So, and I think, people will call me a Druid, and I kind of accept that because it's kind of logical. But I don't think of myself with that label. I'm a kind of human being in this world, and just learning. I'm a seeker, if you like. And so I wrote a book a couple of years back called Seek Teachings Everywhere. And then it opens with a quote from the Dzogchen Tantra, which goes like a bee that seeks nectar from flowers everywhere. Go and seek teachings from many different sources of inspiration. And I think that's a position that many people have nowadays, that we're really inspired, say, by the poetry of Rumi, the Sufi poetry. And then we might go into a church and be inspired by the beautiful stained glass, or by beautiful, even though we may not be Christian and may not like a whole lot of aspects of Christianity, kind of heavenly music, the kind of beautiful music of Bach or something like that may just send us, and we might not be Hindus, but we'll do yoga and so on. And critics say, well, they call that smorgasbording, just like buffet style New Age spirituality. Mm-hmm. And I don't agree with that at all. I think it's a real recognition of the fact. It's a bit like the way you recognize that everybody has something to offer. You don't just mix with white people, or only with men, or only with women, or only with old people or young people, or whatever. You realize that everybody has these kind of unique gifts, and they're all human, and and they've got their flaws and bits that you don't like, and they've got great bits as well. It's the same thing with spirituality. Like virtually everyone has got bits that I don't like, and it's got bits that I love. And the perennial tradition is like saying, let's get to the heart of this, and what's the kind of the core, that's behind all these religions and spiritual ways, that's expressed in different ways. And so that's what I mean by the perennial tradition.
Well, welcome to the Casual Temple. We have a wonderful opportunity today to chat with Philip Carr-Gomm. Philip's journey began in his teens studying Druidry with Ross Nichols. And in 1988, Philip was asked to lead the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids, a role he passed on to his successor, Eimear Burke, in June 2020. Since then, he has been involved in the work of the Synthesis Institute, the Acer Integration Program, and the Sophrology Institute. Philip draws upon the perennial tradition, finding inspiration in the wisdom of all spiritual paths and teachings, and follows the way of the universal mystic. In recent years, he has trained to be a teacher of yoga nidra and mindfulness meditation, and has created an online school, The Art of Living Well, as well as offering books, apps, meditation talks, online courses, and events in the space where spirituality and psychology meet. Philip, I'm so thrilled to have you as our guest on Casual Temple.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, you have quite a lot of things that you do, and I love it. It's a lot of really cool things that I've had some exposure to, and some I have not. So excited to talk with you. So we kind of just get started sort of at wherever you consider the beginning of how you started studying Druidry, and then the path you're kind of on today.
Well, I think there comes a time, I guess, when you become interested in this topic, and this can be at any stage in life. And I was just fortunate, or it just happened that I became interested really early on. And I was also fortunate in that my family, my dad in particular, was surrounded by people who were into spirituality and alternative spirituality. So it was in the 60s, and I was 11, and there was a family friend, Ross Nichols, who was the chief druid, the chief of the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids, and so my dad ended up working for him. He was running a school, and my dad worked for him as a teacher. and I was surrounded by kind of books and magazines and people who are interested in this kind of thing. So that's how it started for me. And yeah, there's so much to say.
So much
Another
to
question.
say. Let's see. So yeah, so I definitely on the so when did you studied with Ross Nichols, and then what is exactly like what is a druidry, or at least what did the path look like then? As
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, the path then, it was funny because I guess I was living in sort of three worlds, I suppose. I mean, well, four if you include the family, the world of the family, you know, and then the world of school with your friends and all the rest of it, very influential. And then there were these two other worlds that were my prime focus. Those other two were background. The foreground was the friends. As I became as I turned sort of 16 and wanted to study Druidry. Everybody was smoking pot then. It was London in the late 60s, and so there was my group of friends, slouched in people's sitting rooms, listening to music, and misbehaving. And so that was one reality. But then there was this other reality, which was the world of the esoteric, the spiritual, the occult, the magical, which I found quite fascinating. And my friends weren't into that because what they saw from the outside was kind of old people, straights as they were called, straights who were kind of the same age as their parents, but were interested in magic and stuff like that. And I didn't mind about that. Sometimes I found it frustrating, but generally I was prepared to kind of sift through that to get to to experience what I wanted. So that was what was going on. So I would sort of oscillate. My social life would move between being with my compatriots, my friends, and then being with people the same age as my parents, doing Druid ceremonies or talking about astrology and the tarot and going to lectures and things like that.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds like a really cool different worlds that you were able to inhabit. That's very interesting. Now I'm like very how do I say it? Like I don't know too much about Druidry. I kind of, probably what mainstream people understand that it is. But my current sort of understanding about the path of Druidry is that it was kind of lost for a while, and then sort of like maybe you and the groups in the UK are trying to kind of make a new sort of, I don't know, kind of revisit those paths and maybe rediscover them. But maybe you could explain a little bit more about that.
Well, basically, the original, the ancient Druids were one of the spiritual and kind of magical groupings in pre-Christian Europe, most particularly the Ireland, the British Isles, and what we now consider as Western France. So they were pagan, animistic, if you like, and an oral culture, and then when Christianity came, there was this period where those cultures, if you like, or those spiritual traditions, were subsumed by Christianity. Some of it got absorbed into Christianity, and you can see the kind of traces of it in Christianity.
Right.
Others were completely eradicated, and you had a period of about 1,000 years from around the 6th century. So by the 6th century, the door had kind of closed on Druidry being practiced as a spirituality in Western Europe, and then for about 1,000 years, you didn't have any real manifestation of it, although there were traces and so on going on. And then in the 17th century, people started to kind of look again at their ancestry and think, hang on a minute, as the kind of grip of the church loosened with the Enlightenment, that where the grip of the church was sort of loosened, people looked at their past and said, hang on a minute, these people were rather interesting, weren't they? They were philosophers and so on, and started to form societies where they would sort of study what they could of Druidry. So modern day Druidry has a written history of about 300 years. So from the sort of 17th century onwards, people were writing about it. So lots of books and articles and so on. 300 years of written history. But they were working with material that was very far away. It was like 1,000 years old. Right. So you know, a lot of fantasy got mixed up in that, and we've reached a stage now. So that was called the Druid revival period. That was the revival period, peaking in the kind of in the late 18th, early 19th century. So in the peak of the Druid revival period, you had the ancient order of Druids having about 1 million members spread out all over the British Empire, Winston Churchill being one of them. Then with the Welsh National Eisteddfod and the Welsh Druids, the Queen being initiated into the bards there and so on. Then you had a period which was then the 1960s came along and everything changed. Somebody threw a switch and everything turned to color from a black and white movie, and suddenly, particularly in London and California and Amsterdam, and you had this kind of interesting fusion of this revival Druidry, and then essentially the kind of impulse of the hippies and of kind of alternative ways of spirituality. Wicca as well, because Gerald Gardner, who was responsible for kind of some people say creating, some people say re-stimulating the tradition of Wicca and witchcraft, and he was friends with my teacher Ross Nichols. So the two of them really were responsible in around from the mid Second World War onwards, the 1950s. They were responsible for kind of reviving these two great kind of pillars, if you like, or streams, Druid tradition and the Wiccan tradition. Oh. So, and that coincided, of course, with the growing environmental awareness, the sort of the deterioration of the hold that the church had, particularly on younger generations. So as you move from the 1960s through to the end of the century and then into the 21st century, you just got more and more people becoming interested in it. So, I mean, now, you know, when I joined the Druid Order when I was 16, when I was 18, I was initiated on Glastonbury tour. There were probably, in our order, a maximum of 24 people, probably more like 12 people who were active. And they all seemed absolutely ancient to me. I mean, they were probably older than I am now myself, you know, but at the time when I was 18, they seemed ancient. And now we have like 30,000 members of our group. We have people all over the world and people of all ages and so on. So it's seen a huge renaissance of interest.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, very cool. I love the, I didn't realize that there was actually some written work that was sort of based on, even if it was like 1,000 years old. So that's very cool. So kind of speaking about books, you talked about sort of, you know, Ross Nichols was being sort of a guide for you. Sounds like your parents and maybe the, adults that you were communicating with, maybe your friends too. But did you have some books that you could sort of recommend for somebody that, if they're kind of interested in learning a bit more about Druidry? I know you have books too, but
I've got books too. I know, and it's terrible. It's terrible to recommend your own books, doesn't it?
Hey.
But I think, like if you write books, I try to make it the best book available. Why write a second best book? In terms of your own aspiration to. So I've tried in books like Druid Mysteries and What Do Druids Believe. I've tried to really present the ideas as clearly as possible in the most kind of accessible way for the modern sort of era, if you like. And then in a book called Druid Craft, I kind of weave together stories and I use storytelling as a way of teaching sort of spiritual ideas. So there are a series of stories, and then the teaching that comes around that. That was a book that I originally wrote as fiction, and I reverse engineered it into nonfiction. It's like, I wish I hadn't actually now, but that I decided that as fiction didn't quite work. And so I kind of reverse engineered it back into nonfiction, making it a series of stories with explanation and stuff like that around it.
Wow.
So that's the book Druidcraft, and then I use the tarot to teach Druidry as well in the Druidcraft Tarot. But there are there are lots of great books on Druidry. Penny Billington's written great books. John Michael Greer in the States has written great books.
Yeah, thank you. That sounds sounds like a really good collection, and the things that you've written. I like that you thought about sort of somebody that isn't familiar with it and kind of considering them, and
I think it's very easy. When you're familiar with the subject, it's very easy to write. Where you forget that people need it to be really accessible and not to be simplistic. You don't have to be simplistic about it, but you can make it really clear and ask yourself, well, what do I really mean, and what am I really trying to say, and so on. So that's what I've tried to do. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Now, so I have this question because I know in the name of the sort of the group that you're involved with, is like the Druids, Ovates. Is it Ovates or Ovate?
Ovates, Bards, Ovates, and Druids.
Ovates,
the Order
of
Bards, Ovates, and Druids. Yeah.
What would you say if there is any difference between the three, if any?
Yeah, exactly. They're like three schools, if you like, that are all part of one school. And the bards, they speak to the creative side of ourselves. The person who wants to encourage you to sing the song of your soul in a poetic way of looking at it. And in other words, to really, the way you can sometimes go through life wishing you could fully express yourself and you kind of can't quite do it, and then in the early stages you don't even know which medium, when you're young, am I going to paint or write, or and then you maybe find what your thing is, whether it's making music or painting or writing or anything, anything. And then the desire to be creative is kind of innate in humankind, I think. And so there's this whole bardic tradition in Druidry, which comes from the ancient tradition that you find in every culture of storytelling. So, in Africa, wherever you go in the world, you'll find indigenous culture has a tradition of storytelling. And, but before we could turn on the television, we would sit around the fire and tell each other stories. That's how we would entertain ourselves. That's how we would learn as well. So if you want to train as a druid, so what we do is we have a training program, and it's in 6 languages, and it's online, and it has music and meditations and films and stuff, and it's also printed if you want to receive it in the mail. And that the first level of training is helping you sing the song of your soul, helping you become a bard, tell the story of your life, if you like. And we do that by entering deeply into some of the old stories from the Druid tradition and really living into them and helping them to illuminate our own lives. And then once that's kind of established, and we then move on to the next level or stage, which is the ovate stage, which is the desire in us to, if you like, be a shaman or to travel between worlds. It's like one of the things that appeals to many people about this kind of path is the fact that there are other levels of reality. So we both, love nature, love the physical world. So Druidry isn't a spirituality that's trying to get you away from here or trying to teach you to transcend it and rise above it, or, not at all. It's a kind of sensual spirituality that's about getting more involved in physical matter, if you like, than that natural world. But also recognizing that there are other levels of consciousness, and you can go to other worlds and other places in your consciousness, and which is essentially the shamanic enterprise. So shamanic enterprise is you learn how to travel and journey, find things like healing, inspiration, illumination of some kind, and then you bring that back to your everyday awareness. And so Druidry has lots of ways of doing that, and you kind of learn that, and you also learn about the powers of plants, of stones, and of trees, and of the stars, and so that's that part of the training, and then the third level of training is the druid itself, if you like, and that's about philosophy, ritual, uh, learning how to hold groups together, to work with groups, to work with people, and to give your gift to the world, and also learning about conducting rites of passage and the seasonal festivals and so on.
Wow.
Those
I
are the
like,
three. Yeah.
yeah, that's really good. I had no idea, but wow, what a really cool way to sort of break up the different phases of
Yeah.
sort of in a round. It sounds very rounded for a human,
That's
So
right. And they're
yeah.
only separate and in a sequence for kind of practical reasons. I mean, the
Right.
reality all kind of weave together and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But sometimes you need to separate stuff out, otherwise you just get overwhelmed.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm very much like I do in my own sort of practice. I have these like integration periods, right? I like deep look at something for a long, long time, and then I gotta like let it
Let it
let
settle.
it
Yeah,
yeah.
let it settle. That's right.
Oh wow, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I love all that. Yeah, all that stuff is like very much up my alley, my own personal alley. So it's very cool. So thank you. Now shifting gears just a tiny bit, because I
Hmm.
know you um right now, at least, from what I can tell, you practice the perennial tradition as well. And so I only am familiar with this because like a friend of mine kind of also does the perennial is considers themselves a perennialist.
Hmm.
But can you let us know what a perennial tradition even means and how do you
Yeah.
practice it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, even though I've been involved in Druidry since I was 16, and that's been my kind of primary spiritual path and inspiration, I've never wanted to kind of box myself in or even label myself, you know. So I think people will call me a druid, and I kind of accept that because it's kind of logical. But I don't think of myself with that label.
Right.
I'm a kind of human being in this world, and just learning. I'm a seeker, if you like. And so I wrote a book a couple of years back called "Seek Teachings Everywhere."
Mm.
And then it opens with a quote from the Dzogchen Tantra, which goes like a bee that seeks nectar from flowers everywhere. Go and seek teachings from many different sources of inspiration. And I think that's uh, a position that many people have nowadays. That
Yeah.
we're really inspired, say, by the poetry of Rumi, the Sufi poetry, and then we might go into a church and be inspired by the beautiful stained glass, or by beautiful, even though we may not be Christian and may not like a whole lot of aspects of Christianity, kind of heavenly music, the kind of beautiful music of Bach or something like that may just send us, and we might not be Hindus, but we'll do yoga and so on. And critics say, well, that's they call that smorgasbording, just like buffet style New Age spirituality. And I
Hmm.
don't agree with that at all. I think it's a real recognition of the fact. It's a bit like the way you recognize that everybody has something to offer. You don't just mix with white people or only with men or only with women or
Hmm.
only with old people or young people or whatever. You realize that everybody has these kind of unique gifts, and they're all human, and and they've got their flaws and bits that you don't like, and they've got great bits as well. It's the same thing with spirituality. Like virtually everyone has got bits that I don't like,
Yeah.
and it's got bits that I love. And the perennial tradition is like saying, let's get to the heart of this, and what's the kind of the core, that's behind all these religions and spiritual ways, that's expressed in different ways. And so that's what I mean by the perennial tradition. you
Mm.
know
Very nice. Yeah, it seems like it's, yeah, kind of getting to the heart of something and where there's sort of maybe like an intersection, or like, oh, there's kind of similarities, but also celebrating their uniqueness, right, of
Yeah,
what they have to
exactly.
offer.
Exactly. You
Yeah.
can do both. And there's a nice analogy in the way we see, we have stereoscopic vision. The reason we see depth is
Mm.
because our eyes have slightly different images coming into, and the combination from these two angles combines to give you depth.
Wow.
And if you're particularly interested in one spiritual tradition, if you study another, it helps you to develop a kind of depth of perception and understanding. Because what you find is that it's very similar but slightly different.
Mm. Mm.
Gives you a sense of depth. And I was talking to a friend about this, and she explained how she went on a retreat with a Jesuit nun, who's an amazing woman, apparently. And this woman said on this retreat, I find the people with the deepest spirituality are often following two paths.
Mm.
And that gives them that depth. So, so I think there's a lot to be said for not just sticking the analogy that people. I met a Buddhist at a Druid camp. We for many years, for 20 years, we had camps 4 times a year, fantastic events with kids and just
Wow.
brilliant, big open fires and so on. And there was a guy there who was a Buddhist, but he was also a Druid. And I said to him, how can you do Buddhism and Druidism? Shouldn't you, just dig, if you're drilling for water, shouldn't you just drill in one place? What's the point? And then he started laughing and he said, by profession, I'm a hydrologist. And when you drill for water, you drill in 2 places at least.
Oh.
Apparently, that's the way you do it. So your analogy absolutely doesn't work. Yeah. So hey, that's my approach.
Oof, that is a great analogy. I'm glad you had that conversation with him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh man. So would you say there is a practice to perennialism, or is it more of just sort of an ideology to some extent?
Well, I think yes, it's not like perennialism is a path, if you like. It's Ken Wilber, the American philosopher and sage, talks about a transpath path, which is a weird term, transpath path, a meta path. So he gives an example: alchemy. Alchemy as a you can have Christian alchemists and Islamic alchemists, and you can Jungian analysts, really into alchemy and so on. Perennialism is, if you like, in my understanding of the term, is looking for the jewels in every path, and then working with and feeling attracted towards those aspects that speak to you because of your cultural background, because of your education, because of somebody might say because of your past lives, your interests. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, explained very beautifully, finding the jewels.
Yeah.
And especially for yourself, right? Because every individual is an individual to some extent.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
going to always be different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Excuse me. Okay, so this one, I know you kind of blends a little bit of psychology with spirituality. So how do you see those two things
Okay.
intersecting? Or
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. If you look at religion and spirituality, a lot of it is really weird. And in the extreme, it's, my God, I was watching last night a documentary on the Armageddon movement. The millions of Americans who want Armageddon to happen. The evangelical Christians, there's a whole, don't watch the documentary.
No, not anytime soon.
It will bring you down so deep. It's horrible. But there are really strange things that happen in religion. I was in a Unitarian church on Nantucket, and it was a holy day in the Jewish tradition, and there was a
Mhm.
rabbi, a female rabbi, who was the guest of the Unitarian minister, and his in his addressing the congregation, he said, "There's the story of the scapegoat, of the killing of the." I've forgotten how the goat in the Old Testament. He said every year, whenever I look at it, I get quite confused by that story, and I give it a different interpretation. And what do you think? And he asked the rabbi, and she said, yes, I can find that story confusing too. But there's a particular Jewish sect where they take a chicken, they take a live chicken, and they spin it on a certain day in the year. They do a ritual, and they spin this chicken around above their head until it dies. And the theory is that all the evil that might be hanging around goes into the chicken. And that's how they get rid of the evil. And then she said, don't worry, though, we give it to a poor family. It's not wasted. They can eat it. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, that's not very nice for the poor family to eat a chicken that's just got stuffed with all this evil
in it. Yeah.
energy. Anyway, so it's hard not to see these sorts of stories, accounts in kind of Monty Python terms.
Right.
That is just nuts. And every religion has weird customs and strange ideas and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a whole psychopathology of religion. And I believe that I think psychology has a huge gift to offer, because it's an honest attempt to understand the human being, how we work, what sort of things can go wrong, how we can help people when they have gone wrong or when they're suffering. So it's a kind of noble enterprise.
Yeah.
Big enterprise as well. There's a huge difference between all the different branches of psychology and all the rest of it. It's a very noble enterprise. And then I believe the spirituality has a huge amount to offer, but that it can't be subject to the same kind of analysis as psychology can be, because it transcends the scientific and the rational often. But the two together make a fantastic combination. There's this kind of, when you bring the two together, you have this field. Some people call it transpersonal psychology or spiritual psychology, but the two together work really well. So that's always interested me, and that's been with me ever since I was a kid, because my dad, in addition to being surrounded by these people interested in spiritual stuff, he also knew various psychoanalysts. So psychoanalysts used to visit our home, and he had books on Freud and Jung and all the rest of it in the house. So I kind of absorbed that as well. So I think both perspectives have value. And the risk, if you don't have a psychological perspective, is that you can become delusional in some way. And in this era of kind of documentaries and Netflix and all the rest of it, there's some great. I mean, you've probably seen Wild Wild Country, have you?
Oh, I haven't seen that one. No.
It's a 3-part documentary on the Osho movement, for instance. It's on Amazon Prime, on Netflix, and it's just fantastic. I mean, it's so well made. It's trying to understand what went so horribly wrong in that whole movement. And there are a whole bunch. There's a sort of genre of documentaries now about these. Kumare is another one, a marvelous film. There's one on the hot yoga guy. I've forgotten his name.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of these documentaries that help you to kind of get inside these movements. And the Om movement, I don't know if you've come across that. The Om movement.
No.
They started by a woman, but well worth watching that documentary as well. So there are lots of documentaries. So I think bring the two together, and it's a kind of marriage made in heaven. It's a really fruitful kind of lenses to look at things with.
Yeah. It's making me think, because you mentioned the hot yoga. I'm trying to remember the name of the guy that started Bikram yoga.
Bikram, that's right. Yeah.
And so making me think like, oh yeah, psychology, because now I think a lot of people have been looking at sort of that guru mentality, right? Like maybe back however many years, like gurus was maybe considered like a positive thing, but now it's maybe kind of taken on maybe that's sort of a negative, but only in the sense that it's sort of more cultish, right? It can be kind of cultish and there's abuse that happens. But the psychology of that was studying it, right? Like seeing like, well, how does this happen? Right.
That is very strange. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So that's really fascinating. I like it's also considerate of like I think psychology is considerate of being a human being, right, in this
Hmm.
material plane. And then this, spirituality is the human being like in the spiritual sense. But I like that.
Exactly, and the risk if you follow a spiritual path that isn't informed by psychology,
Hmm.
sorts of risks. There's the risk of denial,
Right.
where you deny the various kind of traumas and conflicts and difficulties that you
Mm,
have at an emotional level,
yeah.
and so that there's denial. There's a thing called spiritual bypassing,
Right.
which is essentially the same thing. You kind of try to um what's that thing in Monopoly, the game Monopoly? You try to get
Like
to
don't pass
without
go or something. I don't know. It was like a pass.
yeah, you try to get to go without going to jail or whatever,
Oh yeah,
something like that. You get a
that's right.
card. Yeah, that's right. It's been ages since I played that.
Oh, get out
Uh,
of jail free. That's what it's called.
yeah, you get out of jail free card, but there's
Yeah.
also the don't pass go thing where you sort of
Yeah.
skip the thing. So a lot of the impulse in spirituality can be, how can I stop hurting?
Mm,
It's pretty tough. What meditation can I do? What ceremonies can I do? What magic can I do to get out of the pain I'm in?
yeah.
Uh, when often psychology will say, well, I'm really sorry, but you need to just spend a little time looking at it and coming to terms with how you're feeling and expressing it. Because
Yeah.
if you just put it down and try and get to go, you're going to suffer as a result, even more. You know,
Right.
and that's what you tend to see in the guru movement. Is that the guru himself or herself hasn't dealt with their own shadow and their own conflicted stuff, and have
Mm,
maybe tuned in to a very valid kind of spiritual impulse that they're able to express.
yeah.
This stuff has got repressed underneath, you know. And you watch those documentaries and you see it coming out, and it's pretty scary in some ways.
Yeah.
And ultimately scary in movements like Heaven's Gate in California, and the was it the Jim Jones massacre and so on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe even that the Armageddon thing that you were talking about too.
Well,
Like,
yeah,
woo.
totally. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Ay, ay, ay. Yeah, thank you for walking through that. Yeah, that's a lot to think about and consider.
Mm,
So thank you. So kind of my next question kind of goes, I feel like it's similar because um I'm also very interested in sort of being in a human body, right? Kind of observed that a lot of maybe at least Western traditions of religion like Christianity or Catholicism is about like, hey, we need to get out of this body. Like, let's get out of
mm,
here.
mm.
Get on to the next thing.
Yeah.
But
The Armageddon movement being
yeah,
an example, they're hoping for the rapture
right.
so that
Yeah,
they can avoid death
right.
and get out of the body and get out of the sort of incarnated world and be in heaven, avoiding it. So they're prepared to encourage arms to Israel and a final Armageddon
Right.
uh, that results in that. Yeah, it's very strange.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is your sort of your perspective of why is it great to be in a human body and
Yes.
why experience it? Yeah.
Yes. There's this experience of the intense beauty of the physical world, the extraordinary beauty of plants and animals and the landscape. That in those moments when you experience that, you go hiking and you come to some incredible vista, or the sun's setting and you look and it's just wonderful. And then you start to learn, hopefully, that you don't have to just hike to amazing mountaintops to be amazed, that you can actually see this in the natural world all around you, even just in the trees outside your
Yeah.
door or in the park or whatever. And so there's a kind of there's an experience of beauty and a meaning. You see, if the problem with trying to get away from it and is that it suggests that it's not meaningful. You weren't kind of supposed to be here.
Right.
If you take a philosophical position that, well, I'm here, what if there's a reason for it? Maybe I'm supposed to be here. Maybe that's the whole point. Rather than being some sort of weird mistake or whatever, it's like I'm supposed to be here. And what's good about this? Oh, there's these beautiful colors, there's these trees, there's these smells, there's this music. And it's interesting that the experience of sex, which can provide such intense pleasure, also acts as a locus or point of causing suffering, both. I mean, this is a huge subject. We probably need an hour just for this. Right. When you think of the problems in organized religions around sex, the child abuse stuff and all the stuff that happens around that, but it's no coincidence that it should be around sex. And there is financial abuse as well. Sex and money are the two big things, aren't they? And of abuses and power, I suppose you could find. Maybe the more we look, the more abuses we can find. There's power, there's money. What else is that? I don't know. Let's start a list. So I think I've forgotten where I'm going with that, but but that's a good start. Beauty and and when you see a bit, when you're with little children, I mean, I'm blessed to have grandchildren and to have 4 kids, and the joy of holding a little baby in your arms, and there, I think if you want to know whether life is supposed to be meaningful and whether we're supposed to be here and why we're here, if you spend time with a little child, provided they're healthy and they're okay, the innate joy in a little child is just exquisite, and that seems to me to be our natural state.
Oh, yeah, that's really beautiful.
Yeah.
I think, at least for me, my I don't know if you call it path, but sort of my practice is like trying to get back to when I was a kid, right? Because I'm remembering like, oh yeah, I used to be so excited when I met new people and have conversations, which I get to do now with this podcast. But like, just being like, wow, it's really cool just being here. And
Isn't it exciting? Absolutely. I think that's, I always remember a psychology book that just began with a photograph of little kids playing, with that joy in their faces. And then a photograph of a bunch of guys on a commuter train, their glum faces. And then the caption is just what happened. What happened? It's like, how come we lose that? And my kind of goal is not to lose it and to refind it and to have that same kind of, and I know I can be naive. I can kind of say stupid things and misunderstand people or get hurt because I'm too open, but I'd prefer to be that way than kind of closed up and tight and defended because I don't want to get hurt and because life's treated me badly and all that. I want to be open and I want to have that kind of attitude to life. And then everything becomes kind of playing. It's a bit like you and me on this thing now. I mean, like, neither of us have to do this.
Right.
It's like we don't have to do this. I could have just said no to you and you could have not even bothered to ask. It's like we don't have to do this. But why are we doing it? Because we enjoy talking with people and exchanging ideas and meeting new people and exploring topics and so on. Yeah.
It's being kind of like you kind of were saying, it's like being kind of vulnerable, right? It's like, if you're going to be vulnerable, there's wonderful things about that. And then there's maybe things like, not that it's not wonderful, but there's, it's being vulnerable.
You can occasionally get hurt or something, but basically,
beautifully explained. I love that. Ooh. Now I know you also have like your website, which is called, or one of your websites, but it's The Art of Living Well. And so what was your sort of inspiration for creating those particular teachings and offerings? Like, why?
That was, that was the inspiration for that was so lovely, because when I was studying with my Druid teacher, he, as part of the group of people, there was a lovely woman called Olivia Robertson, Durden Robertson, who started the Fellowship of Isis in Ireland, and the wonderful kind of goddess-centered movement in Ireland that has had a big influence in the pagan community. And she invited me to her place in Ireland, which is a castle. And it changed my life completely. I was 18. I just started at university. I went to the castle. They invited me to stay forever, and I dropped out of university because at that time the university was, everybody on the campus was stoned, including the faculty. Everybody was smoking dope, and I'd finished that. I'd done that for a couple of years, and I was over that. Right. And I was into meditation and spiritual exploration, and I didn't want to get dopey. I wanted to be clear, and and so I dropped out of university, and I stayed there, and it changed my life, and I learned so much. And so every so often I go back, and it's like a spiritual retreat for me. And I went back there about probably 8 years ago now, and I had these kind of offerings that I had developed these training programs in Druidry, Bards, Ovates, and Druids, and we developed it as a course, and that was all going really well. We had thousands of people doing it, and hundreds of groups around the world, and I was flying around the world giving, to conferences and gatherings of our group and all the rest of it. But I wanted to explore topics outside of Druidry, but I didn't have the vehicle for doing that. When you want to do something, but you don't kind of know, where do I put that? How do I express it? Mm-hmm. And I was trying to get the vehicle, and I was sitting in the old library in the castle, and I suddenly became aware of this old mentor of mine, Olivia, who by then had died. I mean, she died, 15 years ago, I think. And I asked her, I just in my imagination, if you like, or in reality, I suddenly became aware of her, and I said, what should I do? And she said, the art of living well. This is the channel, the framework. It's art. You're not kind of pretending it's science. It's art, which has connotations of beauty and craft and creativity and art, and it's living well. Because again, it's about being in your body here now, but living well and fully. And so, and just present these in these online courses. And so the first thing I did was I wrote a little book called The Lessons in Magic, which was about how you make your dreams come true. And which sounds kind of corny, but it's, this is what we do, isn't it? We think I want to ... Yeah. Well, how do you make that happen? And psychology and spirituality can illuminate that hugely. And in its kind of crude sense, people talk about the law of art of manifestation, right? And it's kind of working with some of that, but there are problems around that, actually. But psychology and spirituality and some magical understanding can really help you to bring things into being. And so I wrote this short book, and anyway, I developed it into an online course, and I launched that, and it was really successful. Lots of people loved it, mm-hmm. and they followed that. And then I became interested in sleep because my wife had a period of insomnia. I apparently wasn't understanding and empathic enough. I thought I was being empathic, but apparently I wasn't enough. And so the gods gave me a period of insomnia for about 3 months. And I discovered how horrible it is. It's really horrible. It's like, it just affects everything. And so I decided to dive in and explore that from a psychological point of view and a spiritual point of view, and sort of shine those two lenses on it, those two lights on it. And so that was that. So I did a course in sleep. And so I have a sleep clinic, a kind of online sleep clinic with a whole bunch of recordings. Anyway, and that developed gradually. So I think there are about, 10 courses or something now. Yeah. Just over the years. It's a fun, it's like, I find making online courses is like doing a book in 3D, if you see what I mean.
Oh Yeah.
Well, in a book, you sit there, you're on your own and you write the book, and then takes about a year for it to get published, and then it goes out, by which time you've often moved on to the next topic. And you don't really know what people think until the Amazon reviews start to appear. So you're kind of really quite disconnected. If you do an online course, you're getting instant feedback. People are commenting on the lessons. So if you go into lessons in magic now, you'll see there are hundreds of comments of people feeding back, and
Wow.
and you're doing film, and you're doing text, and you're doing audio, and you can have music. I've got people involved in music coming in and doing music as well. So you've got it all. So it's like 3D. It's a whole different world, really. So that's what
Wow.
the art of living well is. Yeah.
Wow. Very considered for sure. There's a lot, like very deep. Yeah, very cool.
Mm.
Yeah, thanks for walking through that. Um, so I know I think I actually saw your tea with Druid video segments on YouTube, which are really
Uh-huh.
great. I highly suggest people to check them out because I think oftentimes when you're doing them, I'm at work in the morning and I get to work at home.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I'll like have a little bit of like a little
Little.
oasis with Philip
Yeah.
and all
Yeah.
your, wonderful people around the world.
Yeah.
Um, so what was so why did you decide to start doing those little video
Yeah.
segments?
Yeah. Well, that was that. So I did yesterday, I did number 311. So I've done 311 of them. Um, and it started quite randomly, in as much as my colleague Dave the Bard, who does wonderful, he's a kind of pagan rock musician, who works with us. And he said one day about 4 years ago, he said, have you heard of Facebook Live? I just did this I just launched an album, and he said there were hundreds of people watching it. It's really fun. You live stream into, and I'd never heard of it, and I tried it, and I found that it was fun. I had a sense of connection with an audience, the kind of weirdness of just talking into the blue, as it were, and
Right.
not was I got over that very quickly, and I felt I was with people, and so I started doing it once a week. And the idea really behind it was a couple of ideas. One was to create this oasis, like you say, because the thing about spirituality, the interesting thing is like you can get it. You can read a book, or you can have a meditation, or have some kind of spiritual experience, and think, yeah, that's it. I've got it. It's like I understand. I'm made of love and light, and everything's marvelous and connected, and even it all makes sense and all the rest of it. But then you have to go to work, or somebody calls from downstairs, hey, you haven't made the lunch, and so and so we need reminding, and a kind of weekly
Yes.
reminder. I think the kind of weekly service thing, I kind of think they were onto something when they came up with that idea. Like once
Hmm.
a week, a little kind of top up, a little tune in, is kind of often it's like we need reminding, really, a kind of just get gentle guiding hand, saying, hey, it's okay, sit down, relax. Just from, because I don't know about you, but I'm kind of always on the go,
Yeah.
and there's so much going on. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was one impulse behind it. The other impulse was to find a way of talking about spirituality that wasn't the guru trip.
Hmm.
Because I followed a guru for 7 years, and it was a very interesting journey, because basically I think what happens is you fall in love with the guru. And the falling in love thing is like you get obsessed by the person, you can't stop thinking about them, you kind of hear their voice in your head, and you have sort of conversations with them, and you just want to be with them, you want to hang out with them all the time.
Yeah.
That's the guru thing. You just keep wanting to be in the ashram and to hang out with this person, because they make you happy and laugh and smile and feel good and all the rest of it. And then you realize that you're with another couple of hundred or thousand people who are also in love with the same person. So that produces some very weird dynamics.
Right.
Everybody's trying to be super nice, but actually everybody's vying for being the closest to the guru. It's some very interesting dynamics happen there. And there's all the daddy thing and the mummy thing. Those of us who haven't had a good dad, if you find a really nice kind of old guy who's really warm and inspiring, it's like, oh my God, and who seems to like you, it's like, this is great, you know. And so for all these reasons, the guru thing is problematic. But the mentoring thing, or the listening to somebody who might have something interesting to tell you, or some interesting advice or helpful advice, that's valid, you know. So I thought, how can I kind of share what I've learned over the last 50 years or so, in a way that isn't doing the guru thing? And for me, the kind of answer is just, will you just be yourself? I mean, you just chat like I'm chatting to you now, like I don't have an agenda. I'm just sharing what's coming through my mind as we speak, and I'm fully aware of the fact that I might say something that's a bit stupid, or that I've gone off a bit, or forgotten something or whatever. So I mean, I don't know if you've seen enough of them to see me doing that, but it's just like conversation, isn't it? I'm just kind of I just chat, usually about a spiritual topic of some kind, or something that's that occurs to me, or I have a guest and chat with them, and then do a meditation, and then I gradually developed a sort of a particular way of meditating that I tend to use. So the meditations are short; they're probably just 10 minutes or so, dropping in, really nature-based, connecting with the natural world and with your sort of deep self. So that's how it's evolved. Yeah.
I definitely, like I said, I definitely recommend people check it out, because it's like every time, like, because I usually have like my laptop up, and then I'll say, oh, Philip's got, I can catch it today, so I can watch it.
Great. That's great. And about I don't know, about 500 people, but say between 300 and 500 people turn up live. And then so there's a kind of real feeling of being together, Yeah.
Well, thank you for doing those. They're great. So we're kind of winding down a little bit, but so we're recording the week of the summer solstice in the northern hemisphere. However, this episode won't be out until October, because I just ended our first season of the show. So are there any upcoming events or projects that you want to let people know about around that time?
Around October, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's very interesting. It's very interesting to be sitting here as the year starts to peak for the summer solstice, and then to think about October, where the year is really waning into Samhain, this interesting time leading up to the winter solstice. And I find it quite hard to do that at the moment. I mean, I think the Samhain time, the October time in the northern hemisphere, is really a time for kind of psychic, if not physical, shedding. Letting go of stuff, and of course, maybe many of your viewers will and listeners will do ceremonies which involve sort of letting go of stuff and burning stuff. We have in the Druid ceremonies, we write stuff down on bits of paper and burn them in the fire, or we let go. We have ways of doing that. So and it's a very beautiful time. It's a time that many Druids say is their favorite seasonal because we have 8 ceremonies during the year: the solstices and the equinoxes and the cross quarter days, and they say that Samhain is their favorite festival. And it tends to be probably one of the most powerful as well, because it's the time of letting go. It's also where you honor those who've passed before you, people who've died. So yeah, and of course, like everything, if we resist something, it's much tougher, so that natural tendency to allow the leaves to fall, to allow the shedding to occur, that's the kind of secret in a way, even though sometimes it can feel scary because you don't know where it's going and what's going to happen if you allow yourself to let go completely. And for me, it's always, the starting place is almost always through the body. In other words, I think if one starts with one's own body and you just tune into it, and it's really interesting to track the tension in your body. And you just scan your body. You just start, with your feet or with your head, You just move through the body, just noticing and just letting go and relaxing and relaxing and relaxing. And what you can do is sometimes you'll find that there's an, if you do it several times, there's just more and more letting go. You just having to keep doing it. And then you might find an area where you can't let go. It's just like there's this little bit of tension there in the stomach or the head or something. And it just, however much you sort of will it or wish it to dissolve, it just won't. Mm-hmm. So then you just hold it lovingly, as it were, and just, and open and open and open. So that's the kind of practice that I do around that time.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is also my favorite time of year. It's a lot of people's favorite time of year. And I think it's for all the reasons that you said, even if they're not maybe conscious of it,
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So where can everyone learn more about you and all the really cool things you're up to, like some websites or?
Yeah. One of the advantages when my dad used to write books, and he dropped the gom off the name because he found it was clunky. It's like, people misspell it and they say what and all the rest of it. So if you just say Carr, it's easy. And but the thing is, if you keep the gom, it's so weird that you're the only. So I'm the only Philip Carr-Gomm. If I was Philip Carr, then there are other people called Philip Carr.
That's right.
Philip Carr-Gomm. So in that way, all you have to do is Google me, and you can find me straight away. Or Ecosia Me, which is better, which is the eco-friendly browser, where they plant trees in return for your. So I always use Ecosia. Change your browser to your search engine to reflect that. But I have a site which is myname.com. With the hyphen, with the CARR-GOMM, and that gives my books and the courses, the Art of Living Well courses, and the blog and so on, the YouTube channel links and so on.
All of your stuff.
All of my stuff, yeah. And then there's there's Instagram and Facebook as well, of course, again with the same name, and then the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids, which I'm still involved in, although I've handed on the mantle to Emma Burke, this lovely Irish lady who is also a psychologist. So she combined Ernstine magic and psychology together. That's at druidry.org, and that's druidry.org, and then there's lots and lots to explore there.
Wow, cool. Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you, Philip. You've shared so much wisdom with us today. Are there any sort of final words of wisdom that you would like to leave us with?
I think that there's a lovely idea that I heard just recently from, now I can't remember who it was. He's a psychologist called. I have to apologize to him for forgetting his name. He's written an amazing book called Us, and in this and in an interview with a friend of mine, he talks about how he realized how important it is to focus on connecting with people rather than trying to impress them. And I thought that was very helpful, because in this world where it's like, we talk about the attention economy, where everybody's competing for attention, and there are even behavioral scientists who work for Facebook and and all the rest of it, who are trying to, how can we keep these people staring at the screen forever,
right.
And our attention is always being pulled in many directions. So it's very easy for us to end up in this world, I think, feeling like we're in a busy, crowded marketplace or street, trying to shout, "Hey, I'm here. I do exist. I'm over here." It's like, I'm interesting. It's like, come and look. So we're in this kind of, and particularly if you're a creative person, and you do stuff, you write books or you do podcasts, or so you're embedded in this attention economy. But it brings with it all sorts of problems. And even at a social sense, when you meet somebody at a party, it's perfectly natural in a way. It's like everybody's laying out their stall,
Ah.
Here's why you should be interested in me. I've done all these amazing things, and I can. So you want people to see who you really are. So you look out your stall, as somebody put it once. Everybody laying out their stalls. So, and if you've ever been, I don't know if you've ever been to, have you ever been to kind of one of those markets like at a pagan fair or a
Yeah.
mind body? And if you go in just before, it's like all the markets, the stall holders are all putting out their gear, and they're not talking to each other because they're too busy arranging their stall with their tarot decks and their crystals and all the rest of it, against the competition and all the other people, before the gates are open and the public comes in, and so that's, it's very natural that we would want to show ourselves in our best light and show to people that we're really valuable and worth talking to and are interesting, and maybe they can go out with us, or we can marry them, or whatever it is that we want to do, but actually, if you kind of switch the dial to connecting, it just introduces a whole different feeling. If, like, the reason I want to talk to you is not to impress you with how clever I am, or all that I can offer you or your readers and viewers and listeners, but instead, if I just want to connect to you as merrily, just talk to you, another human being on this amazing planet, just sharing stuff and ideas, then that feels a very nice way to go about one's life, I think.
Oh, wow, that's so wonderful. Yeah, I love the idea of like more connection. That's so great. Oh, well, thank you so much, Philip. I'm so honored and happy that you wanted to connect and chat today. And thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Mary.
Your support means the world to us. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please take a moment to like, comment, and share it with others who might find this content valuable. And of course, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay tuned for more enlightening discussions. Your engagement helps us grow, and we appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for being a part of the Casual Temple community.